Welcome to this podcast, Mission GJ. At this time, we have our apostle, Erickson Salazar, and leader, Neulis Vizcaíno. How good, we're here, flowing in the prophetic for the house. That's right, leader Neulis, how are you doing? Good evening, excellent, happy, and rejoicing to be here sharing with you. And we are happy and rejoicing to have you also here with us in the booth in this segment, Experience in the Mission. And especially you who has a lot of experiences. We would like to know one of the ones you have enjoyed the most and one that has impacted you the most participating in this ministry together with the apostle. Let us know. Well, that is so. Basically, I've been in the mission for 10 years because from day one, I've been in constant missions within the ministry. What for me has been wonderful and the most important part of my life, even though in these later times is where I've truly understood the meaning of that. I think the word mission, I was able to define it and learn it within the ministry. The real concept of what it means to be in a mission, because everything is a mission. That's why I say I've been a part of it for 10 years, of the kingdom mission. And I believe that's what has kept me to this moment. Everything I have experienced and everything I've learned within the ministry, which has basically been 80% of the ministry. I've gone through all the areas, children's, youth, evangelism, school of ministry, basically all of them. But if I can mention one of the ones I've enjoyed the most, or I've had to learn to enjoy, it's because at the beginning you do things automatically. I used to be told to do something and I would do it. But there was no certainty of why or for whom I was doing things, or what the fruits of that will be. I thought it was just for others. And at the end, and now I know, and now I can acknowledge it, that each mission that I've had, that I've participated on, has been a training for me. That has taught me to know the Spirit, to know myself, and in the latest mission, to know the body, which is the part I've enjoyed the most. And if I could mention a specific mission, I could mention me being part of the team of the production team of one of the contents of the ministry. At the beginning, like every mission, it's always a challenge because you are being exposed. But the part that I've enjoyed the most is that it has allowed me to know the body. Since we are a remote ministry or virtual, there are a lot of faces, a lot of people, a lot of names. But for you to have the opportunity to be there and get to know and talk to and have that closeness, it's been cool for me. Because some people might know me because of my involvement in worship, but I didn't know many of them. People from so many areas. I mean, there's so many people here, people close to me that even live close to me, and I didn't even know them. And that's been one of the greatest things, because there's another part which is where I'm confronted personally with this mission, where at the beginning I used to say, okay, I have a simple part, which is, my involvement is inviting the people to be interviewed, and everybody's going to be happy and everybody's going to come willingly. But many people have said no. Have said, no, I don't want to be interviewed. No, in another time. And they will run away, and I will be left like, now what? I can tell Apostle there's nobody for today. He would just not accept that. But that was a training for me to learn how to handle kingdom and how to listen to the instruction of the Spirit and how to handle the protocols with the different people that I was talking to. And that at the end, it wasn't the person. Here, everybody's fighting and fighting their battles, their own battles. So in order for you to bring people to understand the purpose of what we're doing in the ministry, you have to have a position of authority to be able to do that. And the mission is what I've understood now, that's what it's been my lab. Because when you are in a constant mission, you don't have a chance to disconnect yourself. You don't have a chance to put your guard down or to slow down or let go, because then there's issues. You leave that sensor of the Spirit, and then you can have a lot of consequences. And I've seen that when I allow myself to be entertained and I lose the focus of the mission. Very well developed. I see that Noli can pray and close this.
Okay.
That was the introduction. No, simply because she gave a panoramic view of what she's done, but at the end, I get the essence of everything she said, and it's where she ended in terms of how to handle herself, taking into account details, and how she was seeing that she wasn't having results, but she realized she was the one that had to work on herself. And how powerful, because if a person is not exposed, they're never going to know. And that's where the dynamic comes, where you realize that no mission can be taken as simple, or understanding that, oh, we're gonna let it go, we can't do it. No, you have to depend on the Spirit. That's the first thing you learn. Every mission, it could be, okay, hand that glass of water over. Even for that, you have to depend. We've always said something interesting here, that in this ministry, whoever moves anything in this ministry, even a chair, they need to be in the correct position. So everyone, before it's sent, we prepare them integrally. Because everything that has to do with the kingdom will always have an attack, a contradiction in the spiritual and the natural. And if you don't know that, then you easily throw in the towel and never execute anything because you can't do it. Or because people are saying no. No, we don't go by that. And like she says, if I report that there's nobody available to do the interviews, I'll be taken out. Because truly, when a person is sent on a mission, they need to understand that there's a grace upon grace, a natural grace, grace upon grace, and a sponsorship of the Spirit for everything that you are going to take on within the sending. See how interesting? So if things are not handled within a principle of authority, if they're not handled within the protocols that are in place, if you don't go with that grace, and if you're going based on human strength, thinking that it's easy, oh yeah, just calling people, they think that's easy. Many think it's easy. Everything here is everything, and it's a lot. The simplest thing in the ministry takes a high-rank violence that if you do not understand what you're being delegated, you're going to end up being frustrated. Hear me. Frustrated and affecting somebody else. Well, it's just that the mission needs to be completed against all odds. Because it's not just for them to find somebody, but there's a project that with that project, many will be blessed. So there's a lot at risk. There's a lot at risk. But see how she says, until she took the control and was able to do it, because everything is like that. It's where you are forced, where everything that is attacks within those areas that the enemy knows you, He does it just to see if he gets your attention. Who knows if you pay attention? So he shakes you, and somebody like Nulis with so much experience to communicate. But she realized, the way things get stuck and people don't want to participate. Until she learned, no, go this way, talk to them this way, you know how it goes, and then everything falls into place. But the project that she's talking about has been going on for 2 years, and it's been about 108 people interviewed in that mission. See how interesting? And you say, huh? Yes, just the way you hear it. 108 people interviewed in that content, and they're already calling on 52 more, so that we have over, almost 200 people with the third season. So how good that Neolis clearly says how the ministry exposes each child of God in different areas. And you might say, why do they expose them in so many areas? Because at any moment they will be exposed to far territories, and they need to be prepared to take anything on from a remote place for them to be representative of the kingdom wherever they are. So now is that we have to take advantage of this laboratory. The ministry is a constant lab of training, because a moment will come where you'll be in a far land. And that's why as a ministry, we get on top of technology in order to be able to do more in less time. Okay? That's what we've done. And how interesting that Neolis spoke about her complete pedigree. And I liked all that, and I said, I'm going to use her for this too. She motivated me. You understand? Now I remember, but it's true. She does this and that. But that teaches us, those that always say no, those that haven't taken on because they're afraid or because they think they can. No, nobody here is alone, because Nuli herself probably didn't get the results she wanted immediately, but she spoke. Yeah, look, I'm calling and people are not accepting, and what happens? No, we tell them and they say no. Well, do this and this and that. And then it changed. Or don't call them this way, call them that way. There's a lot to work with, and there are a lot of strategies. So everything that's done as a body, never independent. People fail when they're independent, or those that think they know a lot. They're the ones that fail. They're the ones that are going to realize that there's no way out. And they lose faith because they get discouraged. They say, no, let's keep going. You know that these kinds of projects, they take a lot. How, in order for us to record something, it's a lot of violence. And where we see violence and war and battles, where it's only because of the knowledge that we don't throw in the towel. You understand? So Neolis is talking about one of the small battles that takes place in one of the projects where there's a lot of violence. But as a body, the life manual says we defeat Hades. See how interesting? So we have to be clear that God will always back up His children, especially when that child is taking on what is delegated, when they're taking on the sending. She took on the sending, but that also produces for her to get to know the Spirit, the Holy Spirit more. Only those that go on the missions can know the Spirit. Those that are lazy are never going to meet the Spirit. The lazy ones are always praising somebody else's success. The lazy ones are entertaining the successes of others or enjoying what others have, or they're always paying attention to somebody else, never their own, because they have everything stuck. But Neolis, that she herself didn't think well of herself. Now, in the new position, look how she shared the different ministries that she's a part of, like 70 ministries. And she said, and I still didn't know who I was doing, what I was doing for. And we're like, okay, it's fine because you're still working. Not knowing she's working so much. Those lazy ones that are afraid, take it easy. Neolis didn't know who she was, and look how many ministries she's a part of. So it seems like the ministry is very good, of course. Because look, without knowing the Spirit and knowing herself, and she's part of like 30 ministries. This works. Now, she said at the end, until I found it, until I understood. And that is the powerful thing. The more we take on the mission, the more you go in, the more involved you get, then you will liberate and break that which didn't want the purpose to be manifested in you. You understand? What we do it for the Father, not for man, not for anyone else. For the Father. So, very easily, Neolis, in the first missions and the first ministries, she did things because those that know Neolis, she has a service vocation. She has always had a vocation for service, and we congratulate her for that. But truly, it's not with good intention that we do things. When you don't do things for God, what you're doing is sacrifice. When you don't do things for God the Father, what you did was you threw away your seed. Because what you're going to accomplish is for others to say, oh, great, you did great. And you're going to get that merit. And maybe a door will open. But when it's for God the Father, you liberate it all. Because everyone who puts themselves for the things of God, I assure you that the things of God will turn towards you. That's why it's important to know what seed I'm sowing. Because the matter of you knowing what you're doing or who you're doing it for will also make you find the correct seed for that which you were sent to do. Those that know who they are, or those that know how to take on within the principle of authority what is delegated to them, they know that the one that sends you is the one that backs you up. There's something very interesting in the midst of all this. When you know who the owner of everything is, then you know that the one is sending you is the owner. The one sending you is your owner, and he also owns where you're going. Therefore, it's a great deal. He's the owner of the whole deal. You rounded it off. So people like Neolis, they do things and a lot of service and sacrifice until one day, boom, the puzzle, wow. And they say, thank you, God. Because they begin to understand this is for you. And they start seeing the grace. And that day when you realize who things are for, then you love what you do. That's right. It's like an awakening right away. It's like what I said the other day when I was talking about, why do you surrender so much? And I said, because I'm thankful. So Neolis now is telling you, now I don't do it because I'm being sent or because I have the vocation to serve. Now it's because I feel grateful. Now I know it's for Him. What happens is that Neolis comes from a system where for her to worship, it meant to sing. But she's being taught that you worship when you do things for God the Father. Worship is a lifestyle. And how good when you begin to worship God with what you have, with everything. And there's a psalm that says, let's worship God with what we have, okay, with everything. And at the end, what we are doing is sacrificing, is offering life sacrifice with your effort, with your intellect, with everything that you have. And the ministry, which is the structure that guides us, always makes sure to elaborate the areas where we can exercise that worship. You understand? That's why it's so powerful to have guidance, because remember that we move forward as a body. Those that are alone are not going to get anywhere. Those that are alone at the end are going to burn themselves out. But those that move as a body, where the guidance of the Spirit does flow, then you'll see the sponsorship of God in your favor because you're doing what corresponds to you. That is the important thing. And when you know this way of doing it, which is principles, then you say, wow, how powerful is the handling of the spiritual world. I said something very delicate to one person the other day. I told him, we teach biblically that the spiritual world and the natural world, we teach them both. And I was daring and I said, can I tell you the truth? There's only one world, the spiritual. What? In the natural? For you, when you're submitted to God, natural and spiritual are both the same. Because what you assume in the natural and in the spiritual is the same. You can do something in the natural that doesn't affect you in the spiritual, and vice versa. Therefore, everything is fused for those that serve God. Wow. And Neolise, it seems like she said, now I'm not doing things good in the natural and bad in the spiritual, but now I fused everything together. Everything is for God. So the spiritual and the natural, I fused it and I made it life sacrifice for Him. When you do things for God the Father, then you delight God, because at the end He doesn't want sacrifice from you. He wants us to obey. That is what happens. So it's not doing a lot, it's not accomplishing a lot, it's not experiencing a lot, it's obeying a lot. You always have to begin. Your life will always have a starting point from the point when you begin to obey. After that, erase your whole life because it was a waste. It's not sacrifice. That's why when you activate obedience, you begin to see the mysteries in your favor. Of course. That's why it's so important to listen. Where you're sent, who's sending me? You yourself need to think, who's sending me? You have to know who's sending you. Because the one sending you is the one that's going to sponsor you. And you say, but I wasn't sponsored. Then who sent you? You understand? That is where the problem is. Who sends you? You have to take into account who sends you. Did you send yourself? Then you're going to have issues. So, truly, when He's the one sending you, you see the sponsorship. You see it. And see, as spiritual beings that we are, one of the things we want people to understand, especially when it has to do with the ministry, if we're spiritual, then we should know how to handle the spiritual world. But there are people that don't know how to handle the spiritual world. Why? Because sometimes we are too emotional because we move by the eye. All those that move through the eye will always end up frustrated. Always. Oh, I did so much. Oh, I gave of myself so much. They abused me. I believed in Him. You will always end up being frustrated, or with the leader, or with the pastor, with the ministry, your job. Always you'll be frustrated because you want to do things well, but you were always doing things expecting something in exchange, even if it was just thank you. But when you die to doing things for people and you begin to do it for God the Father, automatically you will feel that God Himself begins to be delighted in you. And you'll see the sponsorship of God with so much detail in your favor that finally you discover what the secret is to liberate wealth. The power of gratefulness. That's right. That's why those that depend on God, they don't wait for anyone. Those that depend on God, they know that they were paid already. That's why it's not the same attitude of those that are seeking for something and those that are already paid. I walk around knowing that I'm paid. I've been paid. And that shows, of course. because you see the seed. You see how you do it with diligence, with quality, with level. You say, wow. And it shows because you have plan A, B, C, D, everything squared away so that there's no error. Because you give so much value to what is of God that you take everything into account. Because you know that there cannot be any mistake. I never understood why Neolis said, if I don't fix this, I'm going to be in trouble. If I don't find somebody to be interviewed, I'm going to be in trouble. What, Neolis? You said in one of the archives that we are all paying, and I happen to owe a lot. Exactly. I'm not getting any more credit. And now that she says that, you know that I tend to tell the ministry, listen, I'm not looking for anything that you bring. I'm not interested in anything that you bring. And I don't want it, by the way. You know, you can receive things that are not under the guidance of God. Everything that people bring, I say, throw it out. I want what we sow in you. So I first sow, and then from what I sow is that I demand. I'm somebody that I demand what I sowed into you. I don't want anything from you. Now, what I sowed into you, I'll be back to get it. Listen, let's go. Give me what I sowed. That's why you see that Jesus, when he went to the fig tree and the fig tree didn't give him fruit, he cursed it, because at the end what doesn't produce is not good. What doesn't produce is no good. God sowed his only child, his only son, and that's why today he demands to save the life of man. But he sowed his son. So you cannot demand what you haven't sowed. You cannot expect something that you never sowed. You say, but I did everything. Yeah, of course you did everything. But you didn't do what corresponded to you. If I'm going too far, let me know. You're always going too far. People, look, this is so cool. To be able to do things like it's established in the Life Manual. Let me tell you, your whole life, God established a law over us, and he said, fructify and multiply. You know what that means? That we are full of seeds. You have so much wealth intrinsically in you. It doesn't matter if you don't have a job. It doesn't matter if you are rejected. It doesn't matter if nobody wants to deal with you. Those seeds that were placed in you, you know what they were for? For them to be multiplied. For them to be multiplied. So, listen, everything that I have will be multiplied. But it'll be multiplied if I do it from the correct position. Because if I begin to flow in those seeds without the correct position, then I'm wasting it. Now you understand why you never produce anything with your seed? Because you did it from the wrong position. The devourer came and stole it. The spirit of rebellion stole it. Because you did not harvest, because you ate the seed. The one that was to sow, you ate. That's strong. You understand? Now, when you know that you're full of seeds, and that those seeds, I can multiply them, then you say, okay, what are the principles? Okay, this is the right position. Okay, now I'm going to flow. And when you flow from the prophetic position that is correct, you will begin to see the multiplication in your favor, always. Wow. So, remember this. The spirit of misery is sowing where it does not correspond to you. And it seems like Neolis, the seeds that she was sowing, it wasn't in the right places. Okay? But the minute she put it in the correct place, then that's it. She says, oh, I learned who I was, and I learned what everything was for. She realized. That's why, because she put the seed where it corresponded. I was like, put the seed here, put the seed. And finally she listened. At least she found there's some that have been searching for 20 years. Okay, Luis, but you don't have to talk about people now. Let's keep going. What did you say, Nelly? No. We found the place. We found the place. So Neolis wanted to keep the seed, but no, this was the place. When you place the seed where it goes, then you begin to see the results. You had to put the seed in the right place, but you ran off throwing seeds wherever you thought they would yield you results, where you thought you liked. That's not why we do things. It's not based on what we like. We don't do things based on what we want. No. I do things based on where I've been sent. And doing it from the correct position, then that's where things begin to get liberated. That's all it was. All in life was about that. That's why those that arrive in the ministry, write it down. We tell you to write things down. And you say, why is it that here we have to write and write and write? Why? Well, because we want you to learn to put the seed where it goes. Or why do you think we're talking about the demand of rights? Because you're being stolen what is yours, because you're putting the seed where it does not belong. Even the devil is mad at you because you're complaining about things that you gave him. You understand? It's like, is she crazy? She's complaining and frustrated, but it was her. But when you put the seed where it goes, then automatically your face changes. And you say, wow, I feel good now. I feel so good doing this. And then you put your effort into it and you surrender and you're motivated, and that's powerful. Well, how's that for you, Nellis? That is true. And also the fact that there's no more running yourself off. You know, you're no longer working harder in somebody else's soil, forcing things where you don't need to. Simply because you weren't waiting. Not so much waiting, but because we received the guideline, but we always ended up doing what we wanted. And that's where the problem is. Of course. Yes, but at the end, as a ministry, we take advantage of that because everything is a training. Today, Neolis has a master's degree, putting the seed where it doesn't correspond. So therefore, now she knows. Now she says, I know where I should put it, and that's a process. And nothing is wasted. We learn from everything. How good. How good that we stop and analyze clearly that everything starts from the correct position. So it's good for you to stop and do a retrospective and go to those teachings, those initial teachings, because I've always said that when you go back to those meeting notes, you find out what you didn't do. Very clearly, the Life Manual says that all those that turn back, which is a synonymous of repentance, God will never reject them, because a contrite and humble heart He will never reject.
Gracias por sintonizar nuestro podcast Misión GJ. Nos vemos en un próximo episodio.